Okay, today I'm welcoming Janet and Isobel from the Buzz Club, linked with Sussex University, to talk about their Bees and Heatwaves project. Uh, I'm really excited to hear about this fascinating project, and also to hear if you think we've got any heat waves coming up, Janet, as well. So there's some opportunities to get involved in the project. So over to you.
Thanks, Kieran. Hi, everyone. My name's Izzy. I'm assuming you can all hear me. Is it all working okay? Wonderful. I'm Izzy. I'm one of the research assistants at the Buzz Club, and I was just going to pop on quickly before Janet starts just to tell you a little bit about the Buzz Club, who we are and what we do. So we are a citizen science club run out of the University of Sussex, and we are directed by Professor Dave Goulson. We started about 5 years ago when a group of scientists decided that they wanted to share their fascination for insects. As we all know, insects are in decline, and they are threatened by a variety of different factors, and an awful lot of those are man-made. And this means we need to start actively conserving the insects. And quite excitingly, a really good place to do this is in your garden. However, as I'm sure we all know, there's an awful lot of contradicting evidence and advice out there as to how we can best support our insects in our gardens. And what the Buzz Club want to do is trying to figure out exactly what works and fill in any of the knowledge gaps that we have using scientific evidence. To do this, we have volunteers across the UK who all help us. So we create experiments to help us answer some of our questions. We send out the experiments that are easy and accessible to our volunteers. They conduct the experiments in their gardens, send us back the data, and then we can analyse it and figure out the results. What this means is we have hundreds of volunteers across the UK making a real difference to real science. And of course, the more people we can get involved in this, the more we can have an impact in conserving insects. So I'm going to pop back at the end to tell you all the different ways you can get involved in the Buzz Club. But firstly, one of the key ways is to do so via taking part in our projects. And Bees and Heatwaves is a great one of them. So I'm going to hand over to Janet to talk more about it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Izzy. And thank you everyone for being here and for your interest in the project. So I am a doctoral researcher at the University of Sussex, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this I designed in collaboration with the Buzz Club and as part of my PhD at the University of Sussex. So first of all, all of you registered to an entoLIVE webinar, which means that you probably know how important and valuable insects are. So they comprise around 70% of all animals on Earth, and the great biologist E.O. Wilson referred to them as the little things that run the world, because they provide very important roles in the environment. For example, they contribute to nutrient cycling, they improve soil health, they are food source for many organisms, they even control pests. And one of the most important factors is that they contribute to food security. One of the most important factors for humans, that is, and they do that through the important ecosystem service of pollination. However, we are currently facing a very important decline of insects. So a recent study showed that around 41% of insect species are actually in decline, they're threatened, or they are endangered. And as you can see in this figure, pollinators, including butterflies, beetles, and bees, are among the ones that are mostly affected. So as we know, as I mentioned before, they provide very important roles, but despite that, these insect declines continue to attract insufficient attention, but not only from the general public, but also from the scientists and the scientific community. For example, a recent UN report stated that in a recently published book on ecosystem services and poverty alleviation, insects and pollinators were mentioned only once throughout the whole book, and bees were not mentioned at all. So this is very, very worrying. And as Izzy was saying, they face numerous threats. For example, the use of pesticides, habitat loss, introduced species, and climate change is actually becoming one of the most pressing challenges, not only for insects, but for biodiversity in general. And the thing is that climate change not only comes as, or not only means an increase in the global surface temperature, but it also comes with an increase in wildfires, an increase in storms, in droughts, and also an increase in extreme weather events, such as heat waves. Now, there are many different definitions of heat waves. Heat waves are very complex extreme weather events, but for my research, I generally use the Met Office definition, which is a period of at least 3 consecutive days of hot weather relative to the expected conditions of the area at that time of year. And I like this particular definition because it shows that heat waves can be very different in different regions. So for example, a heat wave of 28 degrees or 28 degrees can be identified or described as a heat wave in some areas of the UK, whereas, for example, temperatures of 28 degrees in a region of Mexico may not be considered a heat wave because those conditions are usually expected at that time in that particular area. So as I was saying, bees are among the insects that are affected by climate change and by extreme weather events. A recent study with climate modeling showed that it's not necessarily a gradual warming that is affecting bee population, but it's actually an increasing frequency of unusually hot days that is increasing local extinction rates, reducing colonization and site occupancy, and decreasing species richness, particularly for bumblebee species. And so why is it that heat waves are more threatening than a gradual change of temperature? Or simply because heat waves create very stressful and abrupt conditions that they leave organisms, in this case bees, very limited time to respond appropriately or to adjust and adapt to these extreme conditions. And so one of the limitations of these models, even though they're extremely valuable, is that they don't usually take into account behavioral responses, which are very, very important to actually know and to understand how and if organisms are going to be able to cope with these extreme conditions that are predicted to become more frequent, more intense, and more long-lasting. So what we can do to assess these bees' responses, these behavioral responses or physiological responses, is through laboratory experiments. We can simulate heat waves in the lab, and we can control all of these variables and then assess how bees actually respond to this. And this is what I've been doing in recent years. So for example, we found through experiments simulating heat waves that they affect brood production. They also affect brood care behavior in bumblebees. We assessed the thermal tolerance of a widespread bumblebee, the buff-tailed bumblebee, and we found that it is actually very heat tolerant, but it doesn't have acclimation capacity to extreme weather events, which is quite worrying. And other studies have also shown that, for example, short-term simulated heat waves affect learning and memory in bumblebees. They can also affect solitary bees. They can increase the larval mortality and delay development. And there are other studies also with honeybees. For example, they can even affect dance performance in honeybees, which is very important for foraging. So as I was saying, just like the climatic models, this is very important, but is this enough? Like these experiments also have some limitations that I found when I was doing them. So for example, even though you can control a lot of factors, they may not reflect the complexity of natural heat waves. There are some conditions in the lab, such as light, artificial light, or limited space that may not enable bees to respond as they would in the field. And also something that is very important is that most of these studies use commercial colonies, including our experiments. And this is of great value, but also some studies have shown that bees from commercial colonies can be very different from those from wild populations. So for example, they can exhibit higher tolerance to heat. So it is also very important to try to think about other different ways to assess the effects of heat waves. So when I was doing when I was designing my last experiments, I really wanted to study bees in natural heat waves, but I also knew that it was going to be very difficult. So for example, it would be very time consuming. Heat waves usually happen in the summer. So it would mean that to be able to have enough data, I would have to go to different regions of the UK in one summer. So this would be very time consuming. Also, this would be very, very expensive. And it may not provide consistent data because to be able to obtain patterns and to find some important patterns of their responses to heat waves, you need to usually assess the same study site for repeatedly or consistently. So fortunately, my supervisor, Dave Goulson, is the founder of the Buzz Club, and my co-supervisor, Beth Nichols, she's part of the steering group of the Buzz Club, and she has plenty of experience with citizen science. So, as Izzy was saying, there are plenty of projects that are very interesting that people can do from their own gardens. For example, they can design and create their own bee hotels. They can create their hoverfly lagoons. They can learn a little bit more on how to identify insects. And so I thought, why not include a project that can contribute to climate change research? And so, fortunately, they were very happy with this, and so we created the Bees and Heatwaves project. So what are the main questions that I wanted to answer? I wanted to know, in general, if temperature had a significant effect on bee activity and bee foraging. I wanted to know if bees are able to shift their activity patterns in response to elevated temperatures to avoid thermal stress. So, for example, are they capable of foraging early in the morning or later in the afternoon to avoid exposure to extreme temperatures during heat waves? Also, I wanted to know if there are any differences between bumblebees, solitary bees, and honeybees. So throughout my PhD, I only studied bumblebees. But for example, 90% of bees are actually solitary, and they are very, very important pollinators. So I also wanted to be able to take this opportunity and do and study if solitary bees also have some how they respond to heat waves and if they are affected to heat waves, and the same with honeybees because they are important pollinators as well. I wanted to know also what plant species they visit during heat waves. So if there are some plants that provide pollen or nectar or both during these extreme events, and if they exhibit foraging preferences during heat waves, do they prefer to forage for nectar or for pollen when temperatures rise? So why do this? Why does it matter? So first of all, it matters because it contributes to scientific research. So this is not only for scientists, but also for participants. There are some participants that sign up to some projects because they really want to contribute to this findings, and they want to contribute to scientific papers, and they want all the data that they collected to be able to be published and available for other scientists and for the public. And obviously this data is vital, is very important to develop effective strategies to mitigate the impact of climate change and extreme weather events. They're obviously making a difference through this research, which is also one of the most important aspects why some people are interested in contributing to this type of research. But also, from a perspective of a citizen scientist, it also provides some protection and resilience to their own gardens. Obviously, it's very important. Gardens are very important for participants, and around 87% of flowering plants and 75% of crops depend on pollinators, and most of these pollinators are bees. So by understanding how heat waves affect bees and how they respond to bees, they're going to be able to provide resources, but also to have a healthier, productive, and more resilient garden. So for example, in a recent study, they showed that an increase of only 5 degrees, the total number of flowers and the size of the flowers was significantly decreased in borage plants. And borage are very important. They provide resources, they provide nectar and pollen for bees, so they are very important crops and wildflowers. And also they found that bumblebees visited flowers from plants growing at 26 degrees 4 times less frequently than they visited those from plants grown at 21 degrees. And 26 degrees is not even that extreme. So this is particularly worrying, and it would be advantageous for people to know which plants are more resilient to heat waves. Also, I think it's very important that citizens have the right to research. So issues like extreme weather events, climate change in general, biodiversity loss are issues that concern us all, not only biodiversity. So we're all affected by this. So the members of society, they all have the right to engage in research. And also this empowers communities, this educates people, and it has been shown that people that are informed, engaged, and that participate in this type of projects actually take a more active role in advocating for change. So it is very important for people to collaborate with scientists and with institutions, and to be able to contribute by collecting data or even by designing experiments as well. And something that not many of us or that we sometimes forget is that bees and the landscapes that they create through pollination are actually very important for us, not only economically, but they're also sources of inspiration for art, for stories, for music, for poetry, and also they're actually very, very important in some cultures. There are bees, some type of bees are actually sacred in some communities. So we need also to remember that it's not only that we are benefiting from the crops, and it's not only from an economical point of view, but they also contribute to our well-being. And so to go back to the Bees and Heatwaves project and how we did it. So first of all, we started advertising the project mainly via social media, and we also gave people the opportunity to attend the free BID webinar with Dave Goulson. And for those participants who signed up, we first asked them to choose a patch. It could be in their garden, in a park, allotment, a balcony, wherever. And the only conditions, it was that it had to be 2 meters times 2 meters in size, and that they have seen bees foraging there before. So we asked them to record their data before, during, and after the heat wave. This was for around 3 days each. So before the heat wave, around 3 days. During the heat wave, that depended on the length of the heat wave. And then after the heat wave happened, also for 3 days. And then for each of the observation days, they needed to observe the patch 3 times a day for 5 minutes. So it was 15 minutes in total. So it was in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the late afternoon or evening. And we asked them to record the time, if it was before, during, or after the heat wave, the temperature, the type of bee. So if it was a bumblebee, we would ask them to try to identify the species. So we were expecting them to either attend the webinar, or they could also watch it afterwards, the recording. And so if it was a honeybee or solitary bee, they could just write down honeybee or solitary bee. So it was mainly for bumblebees that we were asking them to identify them at a species level. We also asked them to record what they were doing. We also showed them how to determine whether they were foraging for nectar or for pollen during the webinar, and the plants that the bees were visiting or that bees were choosing during these times. So I'm going to show you, we have a lot of results. I'm just going to show you one of among the main results that we found. And so for the first question, does temperature affect bee activity? And the answer is yes. So we found a significant effect of temperature on bee activity, but this relationship was not linear. So what we found was that initially the number of bees would increase with temperature, but then there was a point around 21.5 degrees in which we observed that the number of bees was decreasing. So as temperatures continue to increase, then bee activity started to cease gradually. We also found that, contrary to our expectations, bees were actually more active in the afternoon in comparison to the morning and to the evening. So there could be several reasons why bees stop foraging or decrease their foraging in response to temperature. And one of them could be that they overheat during flight, and this is because the body temperature of bees can be several degrees higher in comparison to the ambient temperature. So for example, some studies have shown that at ambient temperatures of 30 degrees, the body temperature of a bee in continuous flight is about 45 degrees. This means that this temperature is actually close to their upper thermal limits, to their a concept we know as critical thermal maximum. So it is quite dangerous, and they can overheat while they're flying. So they would, to solve it, they would stop foraging and they would stop obtaining resources. And another reason why they're doing that is because they need to cool the colony. So in this case, I am talking about bumblebees and with honeybees as well. So colonies tend to overheat when when temperatures continue to increase. So this means that the bees need to recruit more individuals that would otherwise be foraging, and they need to be there cooling the colony. And they do that by exhibiting a behavior called wing fanning. So they flap their wings continuously in order to ventilate the nest. And so this is quite dangerous for small colonies because they have fewer individuals, and these individuals that should be out there foraging for resources for the offspring are actually just trying to cool the colony. So this means that, yes, they would keep the colony a bit more cool, but there would be less resources, and that would affect colony growth, and that would also affect the growth of the offspring. In our study, we found that, interestingly, for when we analyzed each group or each taxa, we found that there was a significant relationship between temperature and bee activity, or the number of bees observed, but only for honeybees. So our statistical results showed that for solitary bees and bumblebees, there was no significant relationship of temperature and bee activity. However, this doesn't mean that bumblebees and solitary bees are not affected at all. Something that is very important to mention is that, and also to remember, that last year the summer was very wet summer and a bit of a cool summer in comparison to July of 2022. So the temperatures that a participant recorded were between 11 degrees during the summer and a maximum of 32 degrees. Okay, so this is very different. And also the heat wave that we experienced was in September. If we remember, in 2022, we had a heat wave and we reached temperatures around about 40 degrees in London. So this is quite different to the conditions that we experienced last year. So this could be also one of the reasons why we didn't see a significant relationship between temperature and other bees. But studies have shown that extreme temperatures of above 32 degrees can be actually very detrimental for bees. For example, honeybees will start to overheat at ambient temperatures of about 40 degrees, which we already experience. Bumblebees can experience cognitive impairments at temperatures of 32 degrees. And solitary bee larvae can suffer high mortality levels and delayed development at temperatures of around 37 degrees. So these are not temperatures that we've never experienced. These are temperatures that we are possibly going to experience maybe this year or maybe the following years, because as I mentioned, it is predicted that heat waves are going to become more frequent, more intense, and more long lasting. So this is something that it's important to note, and this is also why it's important to continue collecting the data, especially when we have extreme weather events as we had in 2022. Unfortunately, at that time, the Bees and Heatwaves project didn't exist, but we are planning to continue monitoring bees from now on. Something that we found also that was quite interesting is that there were a high number of bees observed before the heat wave in comparison to after and during the heat wave. But this could be an effect of temperature, but also, as I mentioned, the heat wave came in September. And for example, some bumblebee species are naturally dying at that point. So we are not sure yet if this was an effect of temperature or just that bee activity was lower just because they were naturally dying at that point. So it is also important just to reiterate that it's also very important to continue recording the data. So what plant species were preferred during the study period? For bumblebees, their preferred plants were hebe and fuchsia for nectar and pollen. So we observed them in very high numbers in both of them, and they both provide nectar and pollen. And dahlia and the glossiabilia, they provided also a lot of resources. There were a lot of bees. They were quite popular with bumblebees, but they provided mostly nectar. For honeybees and solitary bees, for honeybees, it was also fuchsia that provided nectar and pollen, also hebe, and globe thistle was also very popular with honeybees, but we didn't see that it provided any pollen, so it was mostly nectar. For solitary bees, it was ragwort that was the one that was more popular, and it provided both pollen and nectar. However, we didn't have many recordings of solitary bees. So this could also be because it's quite common that people don't know how to identify solitary bees. So it would be good to maybe get some practice to be able to identify them. Maybe not to a species level, but just to identify that it's a solitary species. Obviously, there were some limitations to the study. For example, we had a low sample size. I mean, it was the first year that we were running the project. We were expecting, based on the people who signed up, we were expecting about 43 study sites. And in the end, we had about 16 study sites. Also, one of the limitations with how unpredictable heat waves are, that's always going to be a limitation when you're working with natural heat waves. We were expecting a heat wave in July, and then in August, we were in contact with the Met office, but then in the end, we had a heat wave in September. So it's also challenging to keep people interested if a heat wave's not coming, and that's when they want to record the data. And with data accuracy and consistency, that's always a challenge, but I do think that providing with more educational resources and more webinars, this could also help. And so what's next? Well, we are creating a comprehensive guide to support bees during extreme heat events. I'm going to put all of this information. We have all the results that we want to share with you as well. So for example, we also determine which plants were visited at specific temperatures, which is quite interesting. And we're gonna have a technical report as well. And this is going to be available at the Buzz Club website for everyone. And obviously, we are planning to publish this data in scientific journals, but we also need to have more data in order to be able to publish it. And the Bees and Heatwaves 2024 is now open, and we're just gonna tell you a little bit more about this in a second. And I just wanted to share a little bit of feedback that we received last year. So participants said that it felt quite inspiring to be collecting data that might be useful to scientists. It was the first time doing citizen science for some people. Some people started, really enjoyed getting to know bees better. Some people realized that it was possible to understand their behaviors, whether they were collecting pollen or they were foraging for nectar. And also it made them appreciate all visits by insects, which is quite rewarding for us as well. And so just to conclude, citizen science plays a very important role. So it is actually possible to study bees under natural heat waves and under different temperatures. Our findings are based on citizen science data, and they reveal that temperature does have an effect on bee activity, but this impact varies by group. So within temperature range of 11 to 32 degrees, bees were observed to forage more in the afternoon. So it would be interesting to know in a more extreme heat wave whether they are actually capable of foraging earlier or later in the evening. And bee abundance was significantly lower following the 2023 UK heat wave. We also determined some plants that offered resources for bees at different temperatures. And as I mentioned, it's very important to continue with this project and to continue collecting data, and also for people to be interested in this type of projects that include events that concern us all. And so the Bees at Heatwaves project of 2024 is now open, so you can register. We did change some things. It is a bit more flexible now, so we're not just patiently waiting for a heat wave to happen. We are just continuously recording data once a week, so this is a bit easier. If you don't work remotely, you can do it during the weekend, so it's quite simple, and you can do it from the comfort of your own garden, allotment, balcony. And so I'm just gonna give the word to Izzy, who is going to tell you a little bit more about the experiments of this year. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Janet. Can you hear me all right? We're all good?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Nice. So yeah, thank you. That was really interesting. I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the other experiments we've got happening in 2024 with the Buzz Club. So all of our experiments are free to join. You don't need any prior knowledge or any past experience to take part, as you will receive clear instructions from us at the beginning and throughout, as well as contact information for all the project leads. What you'll get out of it is you'll learn more about what wildlife you share your open space with. You'll get to take part in real science, as we've seen today, that will make a real difference. And also you'll get to become part of the Buzz Club community, which we're really proud to have fostered over the last few years. So the timeline at the bottom shows you a few of the experiments we've got running this year. They highlight all of the longer experiments, which could take place over a few weeks or a couple of months. However, we do have some shorter experiments that we call snapshot projects that take place throughout the year as well. A lot of our experiments are designed so that people of all ages can take part, as well as to try and get people out in nature throughout the year at the same time as getting to survey and sample as many different species as possible. If you could go to the next slide, Jeanette. Nice. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of the bee-focused experiments that we've got. There's two other bee-focused experiments other than bees and heatwaves one, and they're quite similar. So I'll start with the Big Bee Hotel experiment. This experiment is project led by Dave Goulson, and it is has been created in partnership with the wildlife community. And the idea of this experiment is that we are going to try to see what design of bee hotel is the most optimal design. So what we're asking is for as many people as possible to register their bee hotels with us. It doesn't matter if it's a homemade bee hotel, it's a branded bee hotel, it's one that you know that works, one that you know hasn't really worked. We want to We want to know about all of them. And all you need to do is register them with us and send us a photo once a month. And then if you complete the project, you'll be entered into a £250 prize draw courtesy of Wildlife Community. So what we can do from looking at these bee hotels is that we are going to be able to look at the design, look at the occupancy, and then see who is taking part. You'll be able to take part in this. It started in March and you'll be able to continue until September, and you can register at any time. We also have the Airbnb experiment. Linda, who is the project lead on this, did an entoLIVE on this a couple of weeks ago, so you should be able to watch that and catch up on it as well if you weren't there. And the idea of this one is it's very, very similar to the Big Bee Hotel experiment. However, we're looking specifically at the size of holes. So as Yanet mentioned, there's 270 species of bees in the UK and 250 of them are solitary. And a lot of those are cavity nesting, which are the ones that will use your bee hotels. Most bee hotels are designed with a very specific measurement of hole, which is known to be used by red mason bees, which are really common. However, there are so many other types of bees that use these that we want to know what species of bees favour which size hole, whether it makes a difference, whether they like to be a bit squished, whether they like to have extra room, whether having a bigger hole allows more pests to come in. So yeah, a real focus on hole size in this one. And again, you can join any time up until September. Okay, and then a few more ways that you can get involved. So we have our local facilitator group, which is if you are a leader of any community groups and you want to run our projects in those groups, you can become a local facilitator for the Buzz Club. What you do is you meet with us at the beginning of each project and we go through the protocols, any slight changes you may need to make if you are doing it with more than one person. And also we talk about how I can best support you in delivering the project. We also have a members working group. It's currently at capacity. However, it's definitely worth mentioning. So it's a group of wonderful volunteers who are extremely dedicated, and we meet seasonally and discuss how we can make the Buzz Club better for the members. So if you have any suggestions or anything, you can drop us an email and we get advice from them as well. We're on social media. I've mentioned it in the chat. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, so you can find us on there. You can also, it's not on this list, but you can become an engagement volunteer. So if you have a environment fair or a local stall or a shop window or a notice board, and you want to, as we like to say, spread the buzz about the Buzz Club, I can send you flyers and presentation slides to introduce the Buzz Club and share it in your local area. You can also become a member for free, and you can also become a sponsor for as little as £2, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And we also have Buzz Kids on our website, which is a webpage dedicated to resources that you can use with children and how to get them involved in nature. Next slide, please. Okay. What you can do now, I'm aware I'm throwing a lot of information at you. What you can do now is you can join a project. You can become a member or sponsor. So as I said, being a member is completely free. If you become a member, you get early bird access to all of our events. You receive a newsletter and project updates directly to your inbox as well. And you can also become a sponsor. So for as little as £2 a month, you can receive a sponsor pack, which includes one of Dave's books, insect ID guide, a poster, some wildflower seeds, and you'll also get exclusive Q&As with the Buzz Club as well. Or you can give us a one-off donation. So I'm going to do a quick shameless plug. The Buzz Club relies solely on donations from you. We've got no other income, so that means that we rely on our members and others for donations that will lead to staff pay, fees for the website, absolutely every part of running. So if you want to see the Buzz Club in 2025 and you enjoyed this talk or you're enjoying what we do, think our work is worthwhile, please consider giving us a donation. Any amount would be greatly appreciated. Moving on, you can follow us on social media for updates. You can check out our website. I update it weekly, so there's more bits on there. You can book onto your next event with us, and I think our next one is another entoLIVE which is the hoverfly lagoons. Yes, it is the hoverfly lagoons. entoLIVE, which is with Dr. Ellen Rotheray, and she'll discuss how she's used her hoverfly lagoon project in real life conservation scenarios. So she used it to aid the conservation of the pine hoverfly in Scotland. So, and it's our longest running project, so that one will be really interesting. And you can also request a webinar for us. So there's a form on our website you can fill out, and if you've got a community group, a school group, and you want a Buzz Club chat, then yeah, fill out that form, you can find out more. And then finally, it'd just be really helpful if you could tell people about us. As I said earlier, the more people who know about us, the more people we can get involved, and then the more we can help the insects with our projects. So yes, please spread the word. And thanks for listening. Any questions, comments, suggestions, scan the QR code below, etc. Thank you.